Welcome, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here. So excited that you're all here. Welcome to the NJ Thrive Small Business Webinars. It's powered to you by America's SBDC of New Jersey. These are weekly webinars created to help New Jersey small business owners start, grow, and thrive.
Hi, Elsie, we can't see you.
Oh, shame on me. Hi guys, so sorry, apologies for that. Now let me redo it again. My name is Elsie Lorenko. I am your host for today. I'm an NJSBDC Tech Team Consultant, and I will be hosting this webinar and presenting to you our wonderful speaker. For those of you who've been here before and have watched some of our webinars, thank you so much for coming back. For those of you who are brand new to this, let me just give you a little background. We're America's New Jersey Small Business Development Center Network, typically known as the NJSBDC. We are a statewide program powered by the SBA and partners to help small business in New Jersey with three specific ways. We do no-cost small business consulting. We train and have events starting at zero, very much like the event that we're offering you today. And we have exclusive small business resources to help small and mid-sized businesses. Now, for today's agenda, we are going to be covering any business headlines. We're going to feature the webinar with our speaker, and then we're going to set aside a little bit of time for questions and answers. I shouldn't say a little bit, sufficient time. So please feel free to just start typing your questions in the Q&A section so that once we're done, I will make every attempt to read them with these eyes. Okay, so let's talk a little about the small business headlines for this week. We're going to talk about the Angel Match program. And the Angel Match program is presented to you by the NJEDA, a wonderful economic enrichment organization in New Jersey. And the idea of this program is to help you find investors and then help match whatever they're going to invest in. So I highly suggest, if you notice, the webinar is tomorrow, please register to learn more. The next one I think Lodi's going to take us to is going to be the Small Business National Business Week is showing up. Please take time to register for this one also because so much information is going to be shared. The fact that it's virtual is magnificent because it doesn't matter where in the state of New Jersey you're located, you can attend. And also these links will be shared with you. Lodi's going to make sure to share all of these with you so that you can click in, okay? And we are going to go do one more. And I believe it's going to be the NJEDA ZIP program. Yep, there it is. And this is the second phase for the ZIP program. It did very well when it first came out in phase one. So again, make sure to look at this link, learn a little bit more. I mean, it's an exceptional opportunity if you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle. And this is a great way to get assistance for that. So now that we're all done with small business headlines, we want you to remember something. You're going to have an opportunity for questions, so make sure that you type in the Q&A box. After the webinar is all done, you're going to be redirected through a 3-minute survey. And when you answer that survey, we will be able to send you slides for this webinar as well as the recording. So the survey is super important to the NJSBDC because it allows us to know what we did well and if you want more of this. And it allows us to also continue getting our funding so that we can fund you. And of course, the links and the slides will be very important to you because our speaker is magnificent. And without further ado, I know I've said quite a few things about how wonderful she is, but you're going to see this for yourself. I'd love to present to you Cheryl Vicroy. She's an NJSBDC Tech Team Consultant and just a wonderful human being full of knowledge. Cheryl, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Ozzy. And you should be able to see my screen in a moment here. So I'm here today also as a part of the New Jersey SBDC Tech Team, one of their tech consultants, and I'd like to share with you proposal writing and grantsmanship tips for making winning proposals. I've been working in this space for about 22 years, and so bring a broad number of perspectives. If you'd like to move to the next slide, Gloria. I've had both work in industry for more than 20 years. You can go to the next slide, Gloria, if you would. Working in industry for over 20 years. And I've also been an entrepreneur then for the second half of my career, another 20 years or so spent both running a consulting firm, but also running and taking part in and running several very early stage businesses in emerging technology, including 2 stints as the CEO. So for those of you who are following in my footsteps, I have a lot of relevant experience for that. As well, I've been teaching for several years a course on commercializing innovation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Master's in Science in Biotechnology program. And third, I bring the perspective of an investor as well, because along my lifetime, I have invested in several emerging technology firms, both as a part of the Silicon Pastures Angel Network and also currently as a limited partner in what's called Bell Capital USA. So again, these things have brought me a wide variety of experiences. And if you can go to the next slide, I'll talk about the agenda for today. First, for those of you who may not have attended the session a month ago in February, I'm going to do a brief review of SBIR STTR programming. Reviews are never bad because they may help some of you to remember some of the things, if you did attend, might help you remember some of these things that we've gone over in the past. Then I'm going to talk about proposal writing for this style of proposal, which is very different. It involves small businesses, not research institutions. So there are some key differences about the things that they are interested in seeing in order to fund your proposal. And then I talk a little bit more specifically about how small businesses think and talk about their work, and maybe some tips about, or certainly some tips about how you might begin to think like a small business. So if we go to the next slide, first of all, we ask, what is SBIR STTR? The initials stand for Small Business Innovation Research. Go ahead, please. And in order to be considered a small business, you can be rather large. You can have up to 500 employees, believe it or not. Go ahead, please. Crucially, the I stands for innovation. And so we're looking for something where you have technical novelty and very high risk in your proposed work, as well as the possibility of intellectual property potential. And then the last letter R stands for research. So we're doing research and development. The first phase is to prove feasibility and often validate efficacy and safety if we can do that as well. There's another flavor of proposal that can be applied for, and this one involves a research institution. It's known as Small Business Technology Transfer Research. Go ahead, please. In this one, we have a partnering research institution that essentially has resources and capabilities that the small business lacks. So this does require having a partner in order to be successful overall. If we go to the next slide, we'll notice that literally every federal agency participates. Now, some of them offer SBIR only, some offer STTR as well, and they all have slightly different outlooks on this program, but fundamentally their participation is mandated. And so I talk a lot in generalities. That's where we come in terms of hands-on consulting, if you would like that, to help you know what the differences mean to you. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that there are several phases, and this is true across all of the agencies. Gloria, if you'd like to just click forward 2 or 3 times, we'll see all the phases at once. stopping there. So phase 1 is to prove feasibility with your research. Phase 2 is to begin to develop prototypes or actual working models of your technology. And phase 3 addresses commercialization or commercial launch. The focus on phase 1 is really on the technical side with a very technically oriented proposal and a little bit of a nod towards the market need and the opportunity. Phase 2, we bring in a full-blown plan for commercialization, although we're not yet doing commercialization at that point. And then phase 3 again is when we leave the first, the sort of the heart of the SBI RSTPR program and launch new products. If we go to the next slide, eligibility, I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive here than we did last time. Certainly, we've set the stage by saying that there need to be at least no more than 500 employees. But in order to be truly competitive, we also want to make sure that you have an idea or a technology that is significant to buyers or to society and is innovative. Go ahead. As I mentioned before, this can be done with or without a partner. And if we keep clicking through this slide, I'll talk through this detail here. So we're talking about the applicants being for-profit companies located in the US, and they need to be owned or controlled at least 50% by US citizens, permanent resident aliens, or domestic business concerns, although they can also be more than 50% controlled by domestic VCs, hedge funds, or private equity firms, as long as there are several. No single entity can own more than 50% of the small business. The last points are about the number of employees, including affiliates. And then if we click once more, we'll notice that the staff and facility, the firm needs to have the staff and the facilities to prepare a scholarly document and then to execute a research project whose award decision will ultimately be reviewed by technical peers. Okay, so that covers eligibility. In order to have a winning team, we need something that's known as a principal investigator, or PI. For those of you coming from academia, that term may be familiar to you. And that individual needs to be employed by the business at more than 50%. If we click ahead, you'll see that. This person also directs the project, is well trained in the topic, and in addition to the principal investigator, we also need a robust scientific or technical team. These folks need to be skilled technicians or scientists, and we can supplement their skill set with those of collaborators or consultants, and also with partners and strategic advisors. The partners may be research institutions, or, as I mentioned a moment ago, they may be consultants whom can be primarily technical, but even business consultants have a place in this role in phase 2. So as the business begins to grow, some of the advisors become more, look for more emphasis on those that are related to the business. Now, this slide is a favorite of mine that I use in the classroom. There are some very distinct differences between how business holds norms, values, and practices, and the outlook of scientists, or how science holds these same exact norms, values, and practices. So interestingly, on the left, businesses focus mainly on results. While they might care about mechanisms of action or methodology, they really care more about the outcomes. Whereas if you look to the right, science tends to hold methodology sacred. Another key difference is that businesses demand secrecy and propriety, whereas science values openness and sharing. If you've ever known both scientists and business people, you might have noticed these differences in their personality and how they talk and think. Businesses demand utility, asking the question, is this useful? Where scientists demand validity. They want to know, is this correct? Is it accurate? Is it 100% validated? Or is there still more work to be done? And of course, you probably know this because you live in a world where businesses exist. Businesses tend to keep score by financial performance. Here I'm quoting George Pisano from Harvard in a book from 2006. And science keeps score by intellectual impact, contribution to a body of knowledge, and often the things that are rewarded there are offered by way of prestige, academic standing, peer evaluations, publishing, and so on and so forth. I add a fifth bullet on the right, on the left side. Business people also tend to tolerate more ambiguity. They can operate in a world in which things are a little bit less certain, with more ease, I think. So as we think about these key differences, we want to switch or move forward rather into the next slide where we talk about proposal writing specifically. And we ask the questions, will reviewers see the proposed project as tackling an important and significant problem? Will they regard the work as novel and innovative, that is unique? Will they view the proposed work as likely to advance the state of the art, literally cutting edge state of the art in the research fields involved? Will they view the proposed objectives or aims as capable of leading to new discoveries? And lastly, will they understand what it is that the person wishes to convey? Will they see the proposed aims or objectives as clearly written and easy to understand? If we take these apart a little bit with the next slide and talk a little bit about significance and innovation, significance has to do in this business world not only with how can we impact science and society, but rather who will want to buy my proposed product or service. In other words, what problem does the user or the buyer have that they're trying to solve? And does your proposed solution meet that market need? Problems must be problems for potential buyers. The solution must clearly focus on addressing that or those problems. And the value provided, in business we call these value propositions, rests in solving those problems for these very specific buyers. That's crucial with respect to significance in terms of how the reviewers look at it and how they evaluate it. We also need to provide evidence that the technology is innovative. The way we do that is by understanding what is the state of the art and how does this particular work compare. If we go to the next slide, we look at the link between these things and the review criteria. Now here I'm being fairly generic because some agencies state this differently from one another. But in this case, with a kind of generic look at it, I tried to pull out keywords. Agencies do favor proposals offering the best value to the government, because at the end of the day, this is government funds, taxpayer funds, that are being invested to fund this work, and the government doesn't want to spend those unwisely. So they evaluate things related to soundness of the proposal, technical merit, and of course, we can't get away from the word innovation. And then they evaluate, does the proposed work make progress towards the solution or advance the research and development in some way towards an actual solution? Reviewers also use words such as significance, innovation, which we've spoken about a moment ago, intellectual merit, and approach. Approach references the approach to the work that's being proposed. Moreover, they evaluate the qualifications of the PI, remember the principal investigator, and the team. And again, that's including any consultants if your team is not completely able to stand on its own with the work that you're proposing. They ask, can the team perform the proposed R&D and commercialize the results? And then they also ask, are the proposed costs reasonable and justifiable? Interestingly, and I make this point to my clients all the time, the reviewers can base their conclusions and their evaluation only on information contained in the proposal. They are not required to look at websites, anything that you don't include, other literature that you don't reference, etc. And so this is crucial that you reference relevant supporting data in the proposal, such as those journal articles, literature, including sometimes even government publications that you have thought about and read and evaluated in order to advance your research and development thinking. Let's move on to the next slide. Here we're talking again about innovation, and we also use as another way of proving both the robustness of the prior work and the reason why you might be logically following on from where that is to the current state of the art, et cetera, is what's called preliminary data. Now, in the academic realm, you no doubt are familiar with preliminary data because that is, work that you've done in your labs, et cetera. That work can be used in the proposal to help lead a rational reader to conclude that it makes sense to advance development of your work. However, the data need not be your own. It can also be the work of others, and that's again where this citations and references come in. So an important part of this work before you really even begin to put words on paper with your proposal is to do a literature search. Make sure you understand state of the art, who else is doing what, how are they doing it, etc. And the innovation will be, how does your work stand out as being unique or different? If we go to the next slide, this is going to sound maybe a little bit flip, but for 20 some odd years at least, another colleague of mine, who's been around for a very long time and written books on this subject, has asked the questions, so what and who cares? We don't normally ask those questions in science, but in business, of course, because we want to have a product that meets the needs of the market, we have to know, so what and who cares? If you can't answer those questions about your own work, then you may not be quite ready to enter into this realm as a small business. This program is highly competitive. It's the funding percentages that are made hover around 20%, which is better than R01s and other types of academic grants, but still highly competitive. There are many applicants who apply and don't receive funding. For that reason, these may be the two most crucial questions that you are asked, and you know the answers, you'll have a more competitive application. So what answers the question, why should your work be funded? Who cares answers the question, who is interested in your idea? From time to time, the federal agency may actually be your customer, but if not, who in the larger market cares about your idea and would be interested in buying it after you have advanced the research and development? Some things that business people tend to do is to get to the point and quickly. This is very different than science writing, where often you start from the history and you start with the granular detail and you sort of build up to the conclusion. In this case, we try to have one foot in each of those worlds, both getting to the point and quickly in order to get and keep the reviewers' and readers' attention, but also filling in the background at the appropriate time so that they understand how your thinking led you to what it is that you intend to propose right now. If we move to the next slide, essentially your proposal writing wants to tell a compelling story. Now this is a build slide, so Gloria, if you'd like to just click through it quickly, we can look at several parts and you can keep going. There you go, that's perfect. So one of the messages is there's an important problem. The pitch or this description of the significance should answer the question, why is it important and important to whom? Also, a message is that the current solutions are inadequate. Either the therapies are not efficacious enough or the software doesn't work well enough. We can talk about many different styles of technology, but in any case, the current solutions leave something to be desired. We need to know what are the alternatives and what are very specifically their shortcomings. Another key message is your approach is innovative. So what is your approach and how is it different? And lastly, there's a viable commercial opportunity. Even in phase one, we need to think ahead about the future and talk about what is the intended product, who is the target customer, and why will you win as a business with this idea that you have. So a compelling story is persuasive, and if we go to the next slide, talk a bit more about how you can support or provide evidence that's persuasive to the reviewers. Letters of support provide evidence that others care. You may, if you've done this in academia before, you may have provided letters of support that merely talk about your credentials as an investigator and what publications you've had and so on and so forth, and that other academics find this topic of interest. However, here we're really looking for a different kind of letter writer. We're looking for potential follow-on investors or future potential buyers of the product or service. This might seem a stretch at the moment, but this is one of those things that, again, if you are entering this realm and you need some hands-on assistance, those of us on the tech team can help you figure out how to do this. These letters are required and they are highly important for SBIR STTR in nearly every instance. We also want to persuade the reader that the improvement is, I call it persuasively large. In other words, what order of magnitude improvement can you get? Because this program does not fund what are called incremental improvements or just, sort of the next obvious step along the way. It's really looking for things with very big impacts. In order to figure out the size of the impact, we often need to quantify the baselines and then estimate whatever anticipated improvement there might be. In order to do that, we need to know how large is the problem now and how much improvement is possible. At some point, we also need to venture some estimates about will the impact of the solution offset costs of development? And lastly, in order to be persuasive, we need to speak confidently about the plans that are being made. I see there are many questions popping up, and we will do questions at the end of the session. We'll do Q&A. So I thank you for your questions. It's fine if you go ahead and keep putting them in the Q&A so that they're ready for us here when we need them. Okay, so next slide talks a little bit about intellectual property. If we remember about 4 or 5 slides ago, we talked about the differences between business and science. Business demands secrecy and propriety in order to monetize the value that's being created. And one way we do that in the United States is via intellectual property protection. This means you may be entering the realm of filing a patent or at least a provisional patent application, or other types of IP protection, such as copyrights, trademarks, and so on and so forth. So we can help you with knowing where and how this comes into play. But at the time that you apply, some applicants will have IP protection before they apply for federal funding. So it's best if we at least have a strategy for that, think about it, and so on and so forth. If you don't have IP now, it's okay for you to go ahead and still apply, but we'll guide you on how that might look as you move forward. Next slide, we talk at length about the scope of the work and the budget. And this is an iterative part of the process. I've used, again, a couple of agencies here for examples, just because they use different language, and several agencies use the word objectives. NIH tends to use the word specific aims, but in any case, it's sort of the goals of your research. So we talk about the objectives, the aims, and there are typically 3 objectives or so for a phase 1 proposal to prove feasibility. That's not cast in stone, but it's quite common to find 3 or so main goals. Then we ask, if we draft those objectives, we ask what budget would be required to carry out that work. If you estimate your budget for doing that work and you find out that it's too high, we have to ask the question, what can you remove from the scope of work? That's what makes it iterative. Or if it's too low, what might you be able to add back in? We iterate until the scope and the budget match. And unlike in academia, the scope and the budget, well, the budget is fixed. The scope should be reasonable, not overly optimistic. Many times in academia, the budgets are much bigger and they are more optimistic than what we find here. Here, the focus is on what can you actually execute. In part, they're hoping that as a business, one begins to learn to forecast how much can actually be done with a stated budget and timeline. And then, of course, all these key issues need to harmonize in your proposal. On the next slide, we talk about what I call voice and narrative point of view. Now, this comes straight from, I don't know, in my life at least, like 2nd or 3rd grade or 4th grade grammar and English. Is this something that you might remember from your from your past about active versus passive voice? I've found that small businesses express themselves differently than those in academia. Small businesses tend to use active voice, which means the subject is followed by the verb and is followed by the object. The reason why we use this is because it's more impactful, and also because the length of these proposals is limited. It takes fewer words to use active voice than passive voice. Again, these are things that we can help you with if you come in with a proposal that's over the required length, but is written in passive voice. We may make some suggestions to you about how to make it more straightforward and reduce the length. Also, something that's different that I found between academic proposals and SBIR STTR is academic proposals do tend to use a lot of second person, we, our, and that's because there's usually just a very limited party involved, often a single academic lab, and not usually several collaborators. However, when we move into the realm of small business, soon there are too many parties involved to know who we're talking about if we just use the words we and our. Instead, consultants like myself and my colleagues tend to recommend that you use the 3rd person objective, using things like the name of the firm, the company, the research institution partner. Why? Because the reviewers want to know who's doing what work. And if we're just using the words we and our all over the place indiscriminately, they can't tell whether that's the business or whether that's the collaborator. Now let's switch to evaluating proposals. There are certain definitions that are used in evaluating the strengths of proposals. And essentially, these are pretty straightforward, I think. Strengths, weaknesses, and deficiency. Strengths are, of course, aspects of the proposal that benefits the government through the quality of the proposer's performance, cost effectiveness, risk reduction, and will hopefully contribute to successful performance of the contract or the grant. Weaknesses, of course, are flaws that increase the risk of having a successful outcome. And certainly a significant weakness is a flaw that appreciably increases the risk of unsuccessful performance. We certainly want to avoid any weaknesses or significant weaknesses in the writing if we can. An outright deficiency, that's a different kind of thing that will prevent you from winning a proposal. That's literally a material failure to meet a requirement, or such significant weaknesses in combination that it's almost likely that the proposal will not be successful and the risk for the government is completely unacceptable. On the other side, I noticed we're at 12:50 here, so I think we still have enough time to just finish this out and still do Q&A. The rankings, this is very straightforward, so maybe I'll shortcut this just a tad and so that we can get to the questions. The rankings are excellent, very good, good, fair, or unacceptable, and you can see with my underlined words, excellent work is, of course, strongly recommended for funding. When we get to a good or fair rankings, those are dependent on availability of funds. You may only get funded if you have a so-called good or fair proposal, if there are no excellent or very good proposals, obviously. And then unacceptable means not recommended for funding, at least on this round. This is almost my last slide, and I circle back from thinking about rankings and criteria to the next one, which says, well, this sounds a little difficult and a lot of work. If we move to the next slide, please, there are still several reasons to pursue SBI or STTR funding. One is the wish to develop new products or services for use at commercial scale, or to establish a marketing position with the government agency where they become your funder. And certainly, no matter what, the process is worth it for the strategies that you develop, the planning that you do, and the people and partners that you meet. With that, I bring my presentation to a close, and we can open up the Q&A and also offer again our assistance to help you get started as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was such awesome information. You're just always such a wonderful speaker and you bring so much to the table. I try.
Thank you.
One of your webinars. Okay, I have the first question is from an anonymous attendee. Would this recording be available later? Yes. There is a survey on the chat, I believe. You can fill it out there. You will also be redirected to the survey after the webinar is done. So once you fill it out, we will send you the both the link to the recording and the presentation.
And maybe, Ozzy, if you don't mind, I can just go through these next ones because
Sure,
some of them may have been answered already. Cheryl Fitzer Addis, thank you for your question. Does the PI need to be employed prior to the application, or can that happen as a part of the grant being awarded? The PI does not need to be employed by the firm at the point of applying. They do need to execute a letter of commitment that states that they will be employed at least 51% by the firm at time of award. So that does give a little grace period in which to have the business be able to start working on on an application and find the money to fund the employment of the PI as well as others on the team. Robert Warner, I think I mentioned as a part of the presentation that there are about 20% plus or minus of SBIR STTR proposals are funded. If that sounds discouraging, keep in mind that, have you ever seen late night TV where they're the guys on the TV pounding a big book that says, I'm going to show you how to get government funding? Well, that's not really us. We're much more serious than that. But there are some people who, of course, who apply who really are not at all. My point is that there are some applicants who don't have any useful credentials for this. Another question for Robert: do topics come from favored vendors, and are they hardwired? That's a great question. I would say there have been in the past, keep in mind this program's been in existence since about the 1980s, and there are vendors called primes, which are perhaps we could make an argument that they might be favored to do really large Department of Defense contracts. However, I would say within the last 10 years or so, that's really been fairly disassembled. There are also several kinds of solicitations that are what are called omnibus solicitations, where anyone can propose a topic. They propose the topic related to their own research. And so in that case, I don't think there's any favoritism involved. You know, the country realizes that in order to be competitive with innovation, we must foster these kind of high risk proposals. And I don't know, I've been part of literally at this point several dozen proposals that were selected for funding over the years, and some of them from very tiny businesses that have never been heard of before. I hope that answers your question. Rama, you are a software company for biotech and CRO drug development. Have struggled to succeed with our proposals. Yes, there are many winners for those types of companies. It'd be hard to diagnose what's going on exactly with you without meeting with you, you know, individually. But I'd be happy, or myself or my colleagues would be happy to look at your past work and to see if you even have any reviews that have been provided, maybe failed attempts at funding, but still provided some commentary that we could evaluate and kind of figure out how to help you succeed. That's what we're here for. Hopefully that, oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Robert Warner, again, who reviews the proposals? Well, people are recruited from academia and from business. They are not government employees. The government employees facilitate the panel reviews in terms of like a panel discussion. And they do at some point weigh in on what are the needs of the agency. But the people who review are people like yourself and myself. If you're in academia, you may have reviewed other types of proposals. I myself have been asked to review proposals, as have many colleagues that are doing the work of our tech team. It is possible that there might be some competitors. However, there are mechanisms in place to limit that or entirely remove it, because certain agencies allow you to make a list of people you do not want to review your proposal. Again, that varies from agency to agency, but I think hopefully I've given you a pretty strong answer that it's a fair process. And there are means to deal with it if you really feel like you've been treated unfairly. Another question from Robert. How much time does the average proposal take to develop and complete? That is a great question and very difficult to answer precisely. And that's because it depends on your skills, your quickness, as well as your technology. I have heard estimates from other consultants that it might take up between 100 and 400 hours. Personally, I don't think I've ever been part of a proposal that took 400 hours. Most of the time, I find it's 100 or maybe less than that. Some of the work is busy work, having to do with form filling and so on and so forth. So it's not 100 hours of intense effort. And again, if you ask for assistance from some of us on the tech team, we can probably shortcut that proposal for you. I understand your comment about if they aren't funded and are costly to businesses. I understand why you might feel that way, but with assistance, hopefully the planning in and of itself is really helpful, because if you're trying to innovate, you need to always plan what it is that your business is going to focus on. And so I think you would have some benefit in that regard. Okay. I don't know quite how to say your name, Zahir Nafi. Are there grants or programs to help fund startup commercial trucking companies? Not with overhead, I'm afraid. I would recommend that you speak to our colleagues at the NJSBDC who are not on the technical team, because the tech team is really for emerging technology, and it wouldn't help with something that we would think of as a so-called Main Street business. But there are other programs that may be able to help you with that. Robert, these proposals require certain sections specified by the organization. Some sections are overlapping. Great question. Yeah, what I have found, and it sounds like you found the same thing I do, is that sometimes the solicitations aren't written perfectly. A recent example of that was NSF had a solicitation in, like, I think it was maybe 2020, 2022, where they ask over and over again about innovation. And that, in my opinion, would be characterized as overlapping. Luckily, this past year, they made an effort to rewrite their proposal solicitation. And so the new one is much, much better. Now there's less overlap. There are, of course, little hints and tricks of the trade that we can help you with on that. But yeah, human beings write the solicitations, and so they're not perfect. Letters of support, where do they go? Well, they go in the other supplementary documents. And then a question about if we already have a patent, does that invalidate the idea? No. A lot of times people have a patent but haven't really done some R&D. So you still would very much be eligible. I'm going to ask my team, how are we doing for time? Because there still are several questions and I'd like to go through them, but I see that there are many more being added. So shall we carry on, or shall we?
I think we're still okay based on the time frame that we set aside. So it's only 1:02 right now.
Okay. And we can go until 1:10?
1:30. About 1:30.
Oh, 1:30. I
Reserved
see. I
until-
see. Oh, thank you for that. Okay, got it. So yeah, I would say, let me just elaborate for a moment then on Robert's question. Patents, having a patent still doesn't mean you've done the market research or the R&D that's necessary to really have a commercial product. It's only the start of the process. And so I would not see that as standing in your way at all. On to Grace. Grace, how can a responsible certified women-owned minority business recycling get a grant to open a manufacturing company? That is an interesting question. Now, I think just off the top, when I hear your question, I think maybe it might be an agency like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, or maybe even the Department of Energy that might be interested in funding something like this. But I would need to know more to help you find your best match. And that's one of the things that the tech team does is once we know a little bit more about your business, we work to figure out where that fit is and point you in the direction of those particular agencies versus ones that would not have any interest in your technology. Likewise, typical timelines for work being done in the scope of a phase 1 application. I wonder if this is for Cheryl, I wonder if you're asking about the scope of the proposal versus the scope of the application. I'll try to speak to both. The length of the proposed work usually goes in a phase 1 between 6 and 12 months. Sometimes agencies allow you a choice where you get to choose if you want to propose to do the work in 6 or 12 months, but sometimes it's a stated time frame. And then there's the occasional agency that has an 8-month window. So again, this is one of these things that differs a little bit here and there. However, if you're talking about the application, that, I think to have a decent application, you would need a minimum of probably 8 weeks. And it's better if you have even more time than that. 8 weeks is really pushing it in case something goes wrong with your registration or something. So that's maybe the minimum. Let's see. Robert has an opinion that the funding permitted in phase 1 barely covers the costs. I would say, and then he asked, does the government actually choose a proposal because it saves a few bucks? No, definitely not. My point about that when I was speaking earlier is they try not to waste taxpayer money, but there's very little emphasis placed on, if a budget is at the pay line versus under the pay line. In fact, most agencies encourage you to ask for the absolute maximum that you can. And the maximum is defined by their budget because the amount they devote to this program is a percentage of their budget. So hopefully I've answered your question there. How many reviewers review each proposal? That differs a lot from agency to agency. I have seen review panels that had 20 people on them, but usually when the panels are large like that, not all of those 20 people are assigned every single proposal to review in detail. There's a proposal leader assigned, and then maybe part of that 20-person panel might be assigned to review small business applicant A, and then another set of reviewers on small business applicant B. However, they do come together and discuss them all with each other. And no, the ratings are not averaged. Each independent reviewer does establish their own ratings. That's why if you receive feedback from an agency, whether you're funded or not funded, but if you receive feedback, you'll see that the ratings are quite different. So it's obvious that they're not averaging them. Jerry, does anyone read your proposal prior to submitting and advise if you need to fix it up? Yes, hopefully you ask us to do that and we read it and make suggestions. As you know, it's really hard when you know a lot about something to talk about it in a way that covers every base, because you maybe take some things for granted and you're thinking, oh, they know about that. But actually, we, as your tech team, who don't know as much about your technology as you do, we're a wonderful stand-in for these reviewers, because if we don't understand what you're saying, then we can be pretty sure that the reviewers likewise won't understand what you're saying. If you work with us in advance, we help you with that. You're probably going to have a much greater chance of winning than if you just, work on it yourself and submit it. It would be akin to someone trying to write a novel without an editor, right? So, and there's no shame or any of that in asking for help. In fact, most academic proposers have lots and lots of people look at their work before they submit it. Mike says, hi, I'm an engineer. I have a patent and a company. How can I determine if my technology is something you should submit? And then asks, how does a topic get generated? Okay, so again, maybe one of the easiest ways, Mike, is to sign up for a session and speak to us. You could, if you prefer, go on several web searches and try to find where the fit is on your own, but it might be a lengthy search and you may miss some things. It's better with a guide, one of us who sort of knows where this stuff is to be found by agency, etc. And most especially if you need to have a topic be generated. Again, you're talking about two different scenarios. One is where the investigator initiates the research and comes with their own topic, or in the case of DoD and government contracts, in that case, certain agencies actually issue topics that they want technology to fulfill. Yeah, I would say, it sounds likely that your work can be funded, but you should talk with one of us to make sure that you're having an expedient and quick experience rather than searching all over the place. Okay, on to DARA. Do subawardees need to be based in the US? Yes, that is a recent change. It used to be that subawards could be let to folks in other countries, but now for SBI or STTR, all of the work has to be performed in the US. It is possible that you can request an exception, but there's no requirement on the part of the government to grant it. And Canada would probably not be as problematic as certain other countries with which the US may have a bit of a more fraught relationship in the moment. So again, you might want to ask one of us, have us look into it. You may have a strong case, and that may be something that could be worked around. Wenjun, could you send links for recent related events and resources just mentioned at the beginning of the webinar? Ozzy, will you be doing that, or will someone from the team be doing that? Great.
For the links, you guys, and for the recording, remember that you want to fill out the survey. The survey is inside the chat, and when the webinar is over, you're going to be immediately redirected to it. So just it's not going to take any more than 3 minutes. Once that's in, it'll be emailed to you.
Excellent. Laura, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, or Lori, how helpful is it to attend agency industry days? I have attended lots and lots of SBI or STTR conferences over the years and have found them invaluable for finding all sorts of not only information, but relationships. I find you can make relationships with potential partners, potential collaborators, meeting good people. You can meet people who, may want specifically your technology. And so I would highly recommend it if you can afford to do that. It's very helpful. Then Alexi and Jerry are both asking, are there examples or sources of examples? Yes, there are, but be really, really careful. You can even find them just by Google searching, but be really, really careful, because the thing is by the time they're old enough to be put out as examples with what would have otherwise been confidential information in them, etc., they often are outdated. It's and the solicitations change from time to time and without a set schedule. So, for example, 1 year an agency might redo their solicitation, and there might be a 3-year gap, or there might be another 1-year gap. We just don't know. So if you look at these examples, you often have to look at the solicitation side by side and check yourself and know, okay, is this the same solicitation, or is it a different set of questions that they responded to? I sometimes will get or give examples of, funded proposals, but only after really talking at length with the applicant to make sure they know how best to use them. Laurie, can you get feedback on your proposal if you are not successful? If you're in that area, do you remember the slide where I showed the different levels of criteria, that they grade them on: excellent, good, fair, etc.? If you receive excellent, good, and sometimes even fair ranking, you will get feedback. But if you're in the unacceptable range, you don't even get feedback. However, those of us on the tech team, can give you feedback always, no matter how, no matter the state of your proposal, we can give you feedback to help you improve it. Okay, Helen, my company received funding in 2011 for the first device, and it's been on the market for the last 8 years. That's excellent. Congratulations. You have a second device with the patent received and prototype stage development. What would be our advice regarding funding? Okay. It sounds like you might want to apply, but you're already in the prototype stage. That we should discuss. So reach out to one of us, because prototype stage, it's a little bit hard to interpret from time to time. In the software realm, there can be alpha and beta prototypes, and then further development, etc. So it may depend on how far along you are. Also, depending on the agency. When you say device, it makes me think maybe you're talking about a medical device, possibly. And if that's the case, there are certain ways of going direct to phase 2, or doing a fast track, which is a phase 1 and 2 combined. So I think there might be some mechanisms that could help you. As far as having a writer, we would not literally write the proposal for you because we don't know the science or the technology as well as you do. But if we can find someone within your firm who is a technical person, we can generally help them with, the writing skills part of it. Another attendee, anonymous, if your startup is a commercial real estate venture, can funding be made available to such firm based on its unique approach? I don't know without knowing more. It's not something that's very obviously technical. So I would have to say, let's talk, or reach out to us and have one of us evaluate for you how that might fit, or if it might fit, because based on your description, it's just a little bit unclear at this point. Certainly what's interesting is it sounds like, there's potentially a market, but we would have to talk more to really understand that. And then I might be coming to the end of the questions here. Alexi, can you recommend SBIR conferences? So this used to be very straightforward, and it would have been easy to manage. With COVID, many, many things went to virtual. I can tell you there still is at least one national SBIR STTR conference that's held in June every year, and it occurs in Washington, D.C. The NIH used to hold regional conferences around the country, and those, moved around from time to time. NSF likewise, other agencies likewise. So you may have to do a little bit of Google searching, or maybe if we understand what technology you're aiming at or focusing on, we could make more specific recommendations. The one in June in DC, literally every agency attends. It's very well attended. There will be 300 or more people there. And it's at a nice venue where you can also do a lot of networking with people who might become your partners or collaborators as well. I hope my presentation has been of benefit to you today, and I'm happy to stay on the line in case anybody else wants to continue to ask questions.
Cheryl, excuse me a second. There were two questions I saw on.
Oh, help me out.
A little harder to manipulate this because it doesn't go up and down very easily, but this is from Timothy Wabar, I think. I have a question. Is there a period of time before the official announcement opening of applications that you are allowed to communicate with the department or agency spearheading the RFP? Is the dialogue in this pre-proposal period, give me a second because this is where I have to move the box, in the pre-proposal period more open? Can we, an example, can we ask specific questions to what they're looking for in a way that they aren't able to answer after applications open? Can I read to?
Yeah, great question. And that too varies a great deal agency to agency. Some agencies, you can ask them questions whenever, wherever, and there is no period where you can discuss with them or not. However, Department of Defense, because they want to actually purchase your technology and be your customer, they are more likely to have restrictions on when you can ask questions and be answered in a public forum. And then certain agencies, Department of Education, for example, they have an early period where there's a public forum. Then they go into a period of time where there's Q&A answered online by certain folks, but is restricted to, in that case, I should say restricted to, in that case, the timing is such that you, if you ask in the open question period where they're answering online, everybody else will see your question and your answer that you get. And you may or may not want them to do that for competitive reasons. So I'm giving a vague answer because it varies so much. I would say, again, maybe check with us on that. And then think about your strategy, because there may be some questions you don't mind others seeing that you ask, but there may be some questions that you don't want your potential competitors to ask, to know the answer to.
Great answer, and thank you so much. There is one more that I saw. There could be another one, Cheryl, so bear with me because the scrolling part's a little tricky here. Great
No worries.
Thank you. This is from Walter Okor, I think I saw. Great presentation, Cheryl. We have just submitted an application to NIH. Please, could you consult with me to review our submitted application? We are developing another proposal to submit to SBIR, STTR for funding. Thanks, my email is, and he has his email. Before Cheryl says something, Walter, just remember that Gloria, I think, put the link so that you can request counseling, and it's also on the slide. And now to Cheryl.
Yeah, so I think if I understood that question correctly, if you use this QR code to go through the NJ SBDC and request counseling, there will be some background then that you're asked, which we are given. So it makes it much more helpful for us as we, figure out how to help you. So please use that process, because then you'll be in a web-based system that we use for looking at your situation and taking notes on, what we discuss and things like that. So you can't just come directly to us. You have to do through the NJSBDC website.
Thank you so much. I think there was one more that I see. Cheryl Ozzie, thank you very much for the session. I would like to take your help to get my tech proposal reviewed. How can I reach out to you for discussion/review? And I think it goes back to Cheryl's point. Just use the QR code so that you can request counseling. You can also go to www.njsbdc.com and go into counseling. When you register, guys, or everyone out there, I apologize. Please remember that if you're specifically looking for tech in the comments section, look for that. We're looking for tech counseling. So it goes to the right spot, okay? And I'm going to
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I can add, the reason why we do this way is because we too are funded in part by the Small Business Administration. And so we have obligations, we have goals, we have, requirements to provide training for you and things like that. And that's why we have a system to facilitate that rather than just randomly reaching out.
Thank you, Cheryl. And Lindsay was kind enough to share with everyone. So everyone, please make sure you check the dates for different SBIR conferences throughout, I think, Maryland, actually, it seems. Thank you so much for that. And I think you have lots and lots of thank yous, Cheryl. Super informative. Great webinar, young lady. You don't see. Okay, I don't see any other questions, just a lot of thank yous, and thank you for everyone for joining in. So I think that's it on the question and answer section. And we're pretty good on time. We've got 5 minutes to go just for the few other messages we want to share with you guys. So we'd like to remind you that there is an upcoming event Thursday, March 30th. It's specific to life insurance and small business owners. Great topic, because we're all always so involved in just being an entrepreneur and just working for the business, that this is such an important part of that part of you that is the person that started the business. So please make sure to join on the 30th for life insurance strategies for small business owners. And I think we're just about done. So on a final note, thank you everyone for being here. Remember, the NJSBDC has helped 15,000 and plus small business grow. We do this with one-on-one, no-cost small business consulting. We do training events, very much like this one here, exclusive and with exclusive small business resources. You can use the QR code here. You point your camera, tap on the link so that you can be redirected to the site. You can also go to njsbdc.com. You go into counseling. If your counseling is specific to tech, just put that in the comments when you register, okay? It's been such a privilege for me to spend time with Cheryl and with all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody. Great to spend time with you. Bye now.